Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. You can hear me okay, can you? Okay, a few nods.
Weird.
Fantastic.
Very weird.
Let's jump into Ireland. And let's tell you a little bit around the carving out of Northern Ireland as Game of Thrones territory. This is something we've been working on for a few years, Tourism Ireland and Publicis together. So who's talking to you today? Well, we had a bit of an introduction already. I'm Mark Henry. I'm the Central Marketing Director for Tourism Ireland. And you are?
I'm Dave Monk, the Executive Creative Director of Publicis London.
Okay. Why talk about this, and what the heck is that anyway? Well, we're going to talk, as you might have said, about carving out Game of Thrones territory in Northern Ireland. Specifically, we won 40-odd creative awards for this particular campaign last year, working with the last season of Game of Thrones. 3 can lines, gold, silver and bronze. That's Karen Buchanan there, chairperson of Publicis London. My colleague Brian got to hold the gold because he did all the work, but he's not here today, so I get to take the credit. I'm just going to set a bit of the scene in terms of what we're trying to do and what we did with HBO, with Publicis, for the couple of years leading up to this award-winning campaign. And of course, really, for us, it's, as any marketeer, it's the battle for attention. That's what we're in terms of trying to win consumer attention. Who are Tourism Ireland anyway? Why are we talking about Northern Ireland? Well, actually, we're the tourism body for the island of Ireland overseas. So we're responsible for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, literally overseas. Now, it's slightly confusing if you're British, because that means we are both a domestic tourist board and an international tourist board at the same time. For the rest of the world, it's just easy, and I'm sure Brexit won't make the least bit of difference to that. So anyway, Island of Ireland, marketing overseas. Tourism Ireland, we operate in about 22 countries around the world. We've about 150 people. A decent marketing budget, you might say, £28 million. Yes, but it has effectively halved over the last decade due to austerity, government cutbacks, all that sort of thing. So we operating with less funds to try to get our message through to people who are working and operating on more channels than ever before, right? So here's the challenge. Now, we couldn't even necessarily afford to be on TV running the ads, but even if we were, she's looking at the iPad, and anyway, the mobile phone is in her pocket, and that's about to go with another Facebook alert. So, how do you get attention? How do you win the battle for attention? That was our ambition, therefore our focus over the last, decade, but particularly, I suppose, over the last 5 years. We've very much been about earned media. How do we get people talking about Ireland, the island of Ireland, Northern Ireland, as a holiday destination when we've less money to do that? A big focus on trying to get people engaging with content. I'm going to come generally to talk a little bit around that, but specifically, of course, something landed in our lap in the form of Game of Thrones. It arrived in 2011 with the UK government funding tax break support for film production in Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland Screen had attracted this new HBO pilot season, started off at season 1. And at the time he said, well, do you know what, this fantasy thing with swords and dragons, what has that got to do with tourism to Northern Ireland? And we spent a lot of time trying to change the image of Northern Ireland away from this sort of stuff. So, Blood and Guts really wasn't exactly what we had been thinking of. And we said, we want to promote Northern Ireland, come and see more of this. So for the first couple of years, I said, you know what, that's just not really it's not our target audience. I mean, that's fine, it's great, but it's not really our target audience. As it built and built, season 2 and season 3, the audience was growing. And to be fair to Publicis, they sent us the box sets. They said, you guys got to watch this. Are you watching this? No. Okay. They actually bought us the first 2 seasons DVDs, and they sent over 2 sets and said, just watch it. And to be fair, we said, okay. We were looked at the statistics. At this point, it was at the end of the 3rd season. The viewership was building and building and building. The investment by HBO was going up and up and up. And we looked and said, well, if we were to generate earned media, if we get people talking about Northern Ireland in this context, they have a very attractive audience already talking about this show. There were 16 million Facebook followers. There were 3 million Twitter followers talking about Game of Thrones. We said, well, okay, that's interesting. There's an audience there that perhaps we could talk to, that we could engage with. So we said, all right, we buy it. Fair enough. Thank you, Publicis, for the idea. Okay, let's try to capitalize on the success, on this fan base. How can we use that to promote Northern Ireland as a holiday destination? Back to our whole thinking around content marketing. So, we had some experience at this, and investment in, as I say, trying to drive consumer engagement. We said, right. This isn't about running banner ads on, HBO's website saying, take a holiday in Northern Ireland. No. The strategic approach was to join those existing conversations that already exist. All those people having millions of conversations around every episode. Okay, how can we join that with content that captures their attention? So back to the woman on the couch. How do we, capture her attention with something that lets us authentically become part of the conversation about Game of Thrones? Allows us, sure, then to say, oh, by the way, it's filmed in Northern Ireland. So, quite a different way, I suppose, of thinking about it, trying to be value add to that customer on the couch, to give her genuinely interesting content that would win that share of attention. Building a platform, well, it turned out to be a platform. At the time, HBO said, okay, you can use the logo. And that was what it started with, basically, was we went to HBO and said, any chance we could call Northern Ireland Game of Thrones territory. We did have other suggestions, like home of Game of Thrones. They're like, well, we also film in Iceland and Malta. And yeah, I know, but most of it is in Northern Ireland. It's all the interiors are in Northern Ireland, and about a third of the exteriors. You're looking at about 60% of the show, maybe even 60, 70% these days is filmed in Northern Ireland. So they said, well, Game of Thrones territory. We'll take that. So they gave us the logo. They said, now go away. You can't talk to talent. You can't go near the production or anything, but, you're giving us some tax breaks, so fine, you can have the logo. So we started with season 4 with simply a digital campaign using, assets already out there, really, but arguably some very non-traditional tourism advertising. A holiday that won't cost you an arm and a head. Views to die horribly for. Not what we used to say about Northern Ireland. So these were simple kind of memes in a way. They were Facebook and Twitter creatives ready for each episode, around each episode. We'd put them out, paid media, of course, in those channels. And we had the beauty, I suppose, that the series aired, as you may know, in the US and North America the day before it airs in the rest of the world, which meant that we forced our publicists and our Cara media agency to sit together on the Monday morning in the boardroom, hopefully the lights were down, and watch last night's episode from the US so they could customize the creative for the ending that evening. So we're able to have hugely topical lines ready to go as soon as the episode had finished airing, which ensured huge engagement. So, some other examples, but it was all promoted. It was all Twitter, it was all Facebook. That was all it was. There was stock imagery that we used. All the creative, I suppose, was in the line and linking it to that week's episode. But the engagement was, of course, fantastic. I mean, that was the thing. Just the literally people loved this stuff. Seriously, maybe plan a vacation to Ireland. Woohoo! Just booked a Game of Thrones tour in Northern Ireland. Woohoo! Shut up and take my money. Okay, so great, exactly what we wanted to hear. And that was the result. I mean, that was the impact that we saw, was that for a media investment, global media investment of just 200,000 euros, the value of all those extra retweets, if we had to pay for all of those shares and everything, it would have been cost us $1.5 million. So in terms of what we were trying to do as an organization with reduced funding, of trying to have a huge impact, above and beyond by getting consumers to talk about content, we went, okay, wow. So maybe this isn't perfectly our target audience, but it really is. We've tapped into something here in a way that is really doing our job for us. How could we build on that? All right, season 5 was 2015. So now HBO are sitting up a little bit. They're like, okay, that's interesting. So you guys seem to have done some really good stuff there that may even be more popular than some of our own tweets. So, okay. We said, all right, what we want to do for the next season is now, it is fantasy, Game of Thrones. How do we link that to the reality of Northern Ireland? Because that was great, those previous images, but they were stock images, that was fine. But how do we link it to more specific holiday experiences that people can have in Northern Ireland? So we thought, well, why don't we take some of the stuff that features in the show and actually put it in Northern Ireland? Why don't we put a dragon in Belfast Zoo? Which is what publicists did. A series of stunts that we did live across Northern Ireland, taking props and characters from the show. They wouldn't let us near real talent, though. Had to be kind of, dead stuff. But blurring the lines between the real world and the fantasy world. Capturing the stills as before, but also adding video this time. So the dragon moved. Didn't quite breathe fire. That was a bit beyond the budget. But, point was, again, Facebook and Twitter driving that consumer engagement. We froze fountains in Northern Ireland. White Walker incident, contact the Night's Watch. We put in the farmers market in Belfast, dragon's eggs. When people went to touch them, they vibrated. We filmed the people going, oh, jeez. So, and then of course we pushed those videos out through the same channel. So we delivered all the social media engagement that we'd had again previously. But what we really learned this time, I suppose, was the power of the real world publicity. Because these were real world stunts. And all of a sudden you had media, as in traditional media, interested in covering this sort of stuff. CNN, that's Three-Eyed Raven we had as part of the campaign. We actually had a French TV crew come to Belfast Zoo to film the dragon in the zoo. So, and given, again, the media budget was only 200,000 euros. The earned media value, if you to believe those estimates of publicity, was 13 million euros worth. I mean, what, 50 times return on the paid media investment. Because now I suppose we were mixing that kind of real world and the fantasy world in a way that was highlighting specific things you can see and do in Northern Ireland as a tourist. So, wow, things were going really well. Okay, but now folks were, HBO were beginning to say, by the way, there's only a few more seasons left of this. 6, 7, and 8, that's the end of it. So we thought, God, we better really hand this up. Dave, tell us what we did for season 6.
Season 6. Thanks, Mark. It's just strange talking into your ears. I could whisper into your ears quite oddly. So season 6. I hadn't been involved in seasons 4 and 5. I joined Publicis in the beginning of 2016 and took the reins on this campaign, which obviously was a great campaign going forward. It had incredible success. But I guess the task for season 6, which kind of coming newly into the agency and reading the task for this, slightly different again from what they'd done in the first 2 years. So the brief here was utilise the people and culture and landscapes of Northern Ireland to celebrate it as a home of Game of Thrones and create a lasting legacy. So as Mark said, though they'd announced that there are only going to be 3 more series, so we had to try and leave something that was a little bit more permanent. So, you look at that landscape and you look at the ambition of all good creative agencies at the moment is to embed your ideas into pop culture. And I think the guys had kind of done great on seasons 4 and 5, but how could we build into that? That little box there we were hoping to tick by the end of season 6. And as I say, I just joined Publicis in the beginning of 2016, and there were a bunch of ideas on the table for season 6 already. And I think this idea of embedding ideas into popular culture kind of really struck me. And I think they'd gone so far with the work that they'd done, but boldly, I decided, and possibly to my detriment, decided the work could have gone further than they'd done. So I said to the account team, can we kill the ideas that are on the table? I think it's important to be able to kill stuff and go back to the client and say, can we do something a bit more ambitious and a bit better? And so the account team ran off and said, yes, they're okay, but you better come back with something pretty good. And to the client's credit, they backed it and went, okay, good, happy days. So once we'd done that, once we'd killed off the ideas, then we thought we'd better get around the table pretty quick and solve what this problem is. So that's what we did. I mean, from my point of view as an ECD of an agency, there's nothing better than sitting around a table with a bunch of people who love creativity. Leave your job titles at the door. There's literally flat structure. Nobody goes in there with yes, well, you want to talk first, or you want to talk first. No, it's everyone just sitting around a table. And that's what we did. I think Katie was here. She was involved, and a few of the creatives and the planners, we all just got around the table and tried to beat out this problem. And the first thing we got to was this creative principle, where we thought if the show is made of Northern Ireland, then maybe the advertising should be as well. That felt like a pretty good principle to start, a good starting point. So let's fix there, let's land on that, and then see where we go. Remembering that, how can we embed our work into pop culture as best we can. So the first thing we did, there's 4 parts of this campaign. So here's the door, the big lump of logs to my left. But we did do 3 other parts of this campaign. And we thought, okay, in terms of tourism, there's one little tiny thing that you put on a letter that you send around the world, which is like a calling card for a tourism brand. So we decided we're going to hack the postal service. And when I say hack the postal service, I mean, politely. So we made these things. This was a set of stamps. We called up the Northern Irish Postal Service and said, can we make some stamps which align the houses of the Game of Thrones, families, and put out 10 different stamps, one for each episode as it launched throughout the campaign. So here you go. in words, it says, to help highlight the Game of Thrones territory, it's a place that tourists can actually visit. We created a series of 10 uniquely designed stamps and released them week by week. And we distributed these through influencers. And, kind of some of them went out to Australia, and we kind of got pictures of things back, kind of going, oh, it's reached Canada. But essentially, it was a really nice calling card. And as I say, that was sort of like the first gentle part of the campaign. And then you go, okay, popular culture. How do we hack the Ulster Museum? That's a kind of stalwart of culture in Belfast, in the heart of Northern Ireland. How can we kind of infiltrate that in some way, and a sort of Thomas Crown affair way? So we found this kind of classic Irish landscape, was painting by William Fisher, called Landscape with Sheep. And given that, kind of Game of Thrones is kind of now embedded into the Northern Irish landscape from the brief that we talked about earlier, could we infiltrate the landscapes in the Belfast Museum? So this is a little film which explains that, you're listening to my voice. It's probably quite nice to listen to somebody else's voice for a minute. But this is a little kind of 1 minute film of what we did. It's quite a gentle little thing, but have a little watch.
This oil and canvas painting of a Northern Ireland rural landscape is a beautiful example of the period, both stylistically and historically. Fisher's liberal brushstrokes evoke a sense of Sisley and Money, both of whom he knew personally. His keen sense of the beauty of form and colour in nature are both exemplified in this piece. Truly one of Fisher's finest works.
So, kind of nice and subtle. There it is. This is the Northern Irish Finance Minister. That's right. And obviously the CEO of Tourism Island. And this is a lady with incredible purple gloves. But that was kind of, this started to kind of get the PR value that, PR kind of, I guess, resonance. And this kind of ran in the Belfast Telegraph, and people were talking about it all over the place in the newspapers. So you kind of, part 2 of the campaign was kind of a nice little addition. But then we started to think, okay, could we make something from Northern Ireland itself? Kind of the landscapes and the and all the the kind of the stuff that is made of Ireland. And we got to another idea, which was, I guess, harking back a little bit to season 5, which is merging the myth with reality. So, in Game of Thrones, for those of you who have seen it. Kind of, there's a thing called Valyrian steel. And could we make some Valyrian steel made from the raw materials of Northern Ireland itself? Kind of take some of the stuff, take some of the kind of earth, some stuff that comes out of it, and make some Valyrian steel and see what we could do with that. So we found an actual meteor, which is 4 billion years old, and we found some actual iron ore and put that together and gave it to this guy, Owen Bush. And he was a master metal craftsman. And we obviously didn't have a real dragon, so we had to use his own fire. But then he kind of built these incredible knives. And there's a good 3 or 4 minute film which is about the process of it. And it is quite wonderful. This guy is a proper master craftsman, which I think, again, is, it's another theme of all the work that we've done on Tourism Island, is just the craft of it. It's just something that, kind of we feel very passionately about, and getting that right and it feeling incredibly authentic. And there they are. So these are the 3 sets of dinner knives that we created. And they are beautiful. They're proper works of art. And so we kind of, what do we do with them now? So we gave them to a Michelin-starred chef, and he prepared a dish in his Michelin-starred restaurant in Belfast. His restaurant's called Ox. There he is. That's Stephen Toman. He's the chef, and he has a Michelin star. Here's 2 guys that don't have Michelin stars, but beautifully handsome. So yeah, that was kind of part 3, essentially. I thought it was worth mentioning one that hit the cutting room floor, one of the ideas along the way. So remember, we're all still sat around that table kind of talking about these ideas, and we've got loads that have kind of hit the cutting room floor and we haven't bought, but there's one that kind of stuck in our heads, or stuck in my head particularly, that I was quite fond of. And it died for reasons which I'll explain, but we found this guy. So the location scouts at Game of Thrones had been they'd kind of gone and found a load of animals to be in the show. There was some pigs and dogs and horses and all sort of stuff, but they kind of sourced them locally in Northern Ireland. And this guy and a bunch of other farmers, you know, their business was tanking a little bit. And there's a story that, you know, Game of Thrones saved my business, says Northern Irish farmer. It's like a proper, you know, kind of great story that Game of Thrones invested in this guy's pigs, and they kind of helped him breed them and rebuild his business, which is a kind of amazing thing, really. But we thought it would be interesting to kind of see how far we could push that and maybe make some Game of Thrones bacon. Which we tried to do. We really did try to do. For all you vegetarians out there, then, I do apologize. But yeah, we were kind of like yourself.
Yes, indeed. Forgiven.
So we tried to do it. And the only stumbling block we came up against was HBO said we can't make money from the merchandise. So that's the reason it sort of died, really. But it was one that made me chuckle all the way through. And I was like, God, it'd be great if we could sell some bacon, Game of Thrones bacon. It would fly off the shelves in Tesco. Then this happened. So Storm Gertrude happened at the beginning, sort of end of January in 2016, and it tore through the northeast corner of Belfast, Northern Ireland, and through Scotland, and it left a bit of, you know, kind of disaster in its wake. It knocked down trees and kind of, you know, pulled roofs off things, and that was a bit of a disaster in itself. It was even more of a disaster because, you know, one of the locations that was hit hard by it was the King's Road. So this is obviously the Dark Hedges, which is a location in a huge part of the imagery and iconography of Game of Thrones. So we went back to the creative principle. So if the show is made of Northern Ireland, so should the advertising be. So could we recycle? Can we get hold of those logs? And that's, you know, kind of the wood itself. Could we get hold of them? And what could we do with them? And remember, we're still sat around this table going, okay, some guy's gone, the storm hit a few months ago, what can we do? Can we get hold of that wood? So we got hold of the wood, which wasn't an easy, you know, task, but we managed to do it. And we created the lump of logs, which is next to the stage there. You can watch the case study now, because I think, you know, you're sick of hearing my voice probably. But have a little watch, and then, yeah, we'll carry on talking. Has it started? Oh.
It was gone.
Was it starting?
Yeah.
There you go.
10,000 homes are without power this morning due to Storm Gertrude. It knocked down trees in many parts of the country.
In January 2016, the Game of Thrones filming location and 400-year-old tourist attraction The Dark Hedges was hit hard by Storm Gertrude. Amidst the devastation, one thing remained: wood, and lots of it. Over 10 weeks, we transformed the trees that fell that day into 10 beautifully crafted bespoke doors, each depicting an episode from Game of Thrones Season 6. World-class illustrators and craftsmen interpreted the storylines of each new episode and carved it into that historic timber. Each week, a new door was installed at the beating heart of a Northern Irish community, a local pub of a Game of Thrones filming location. Together, the doors now form a tour through Season 6 that spans the length and breadth of the country. As each new door was unveiled, the story grew. What began as a tragedy is now a worldwide celebration of Northern Ireland's links with the most popular TV show of all time. A permanent fixture embedded in Northern Irish culture, turning the trees that fell that day from a devastated tourist attraction into a brand new one.
Yeah, so I remember sitting around that table and one of the creatives going, I'm sure there was a storm that happened, there's some wood lying around somewhere, and we went, okay, what if we get hold of that? What if we get hold of that? What could we do with it? And we banded around a few ideas. Do we make a table? Do we make a desk for the Ulster Museum? Do we make this, that, and the other? The reception desk for the Prime Minister. You go in kind of these kind of crazy thoughts, and then we're like, no, we must make doors for pubs. Because that's what, you're combining a couple of Irish cultures there, pubs and Game of Thrones. So, as I said at the beginning, made from Northern Ireland itself, we kind of found that these are made from Northern Ireland itself. And as the case that he sort of mentioned, we created a new tourist attraction out of a destroyed old one. Again, further down the line, it kind of became apparent that obviously we'd put these pubs which were very close to the filming locations, which were relevant to that particular episode. And the tourism trail kind of came about. There became a passport, the journey of the doors, and people started to pick this up in culture and started to follow it around. One guy on a motorbike did the whole tour, the whole 200 kilometers. He must have been mad. But, these still are a huge pull. We're a year and a half later from when they launched, and these are still a huge pull for people visiting the country. We kind of distributed it as here. We had social assets, and the content pushed it out. Influencer reach was huge, and the press content there kind of took on a life of its own. This headline here, the Irish Game of Thrones hold the door pub crawl is everything. So they've people have taken hold of it and gone, yeah, now it's a pub crawl. Fine, whatever you want to do with it. And that's from MTV of all places and all people. So I guess that's, you've sort of seen the idea. There's the door. You've heard all that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the craft of it and how we pulled it together and how we made it, and the people behind it a little bit. So how we carved the idea. Terrible pun. So here's the thing. At Publicis, and what I try and do, or what we try and do as a team is always try and think of ideas that give the producer a headache. Stuff that hasn't been done, stuff that you kind of look at and you go, that's Colin, that's our head of production, that's his head. But it's funny just handing over a piece of paper or an idea to people like Colin or kind of producers and saying, there you go, deal with that. Because you've got your muscle memory of kind of how to make a telly ad, how to make a print ad, and we've all done it before. We've sat in print production meetings, we've sat in post-production meetings, all that stuff. But it's quite nice to go like, I don't know how to do this. I've no idea how we're going to get this made, which is what it was. And the first challenge was obviously get hold of the logs. By hook or crook, get hold of those logs. And if we can do that, then we can do something with them. Another thing worth saying is it's too easy to kill a difficult idea. It's kind of, you can kind of, I was just listening to Rich Brim from Adam and Eve just chatting earlier, and he was saying exactly the same thing, oh, how do we do this? I don't know. And it's really easy to say, let's not bother, let's do something different. So, but difficult is worth doing. A lovely line from a Honda campaign a few years ago, but that sticks in my head. And every time we kind of come to a brief, it's like, right, difficult is worth doing. We're going to make something that hasn't been done, and it's going to be hard. And if it's easy, then maybe it's not the right thing to do. But in order to do that, we all know you've got to build a tight team, and collaboration is hugely important. I think the reason, everybody talks about it, but I think the reason I mention it today is because it was so complex, the collaboration on this project. We have the client and their partnership with HBO and Game of Thrones, and the writers. I mean, the writers had to sign off every idea that we've done, which is a huge kind of ask. They're kind of writing up their new stuff and thinking up their new plot lines, but essentially, you're kind of knocking on their door going, are you interested in this? And luckily they were, and they were engaged with it. Then you've got the kind of the client and the agency relationship, which, we try and keep as wonderful as possible at all times. And then you've got the agency and the makers and the kind of, the people, the craftsmen, all the, kind of extended suppliers that we kind of use. So there's a lot of collaboration going on there, but everybody talks about that. I've got a personal confession. I don't even know who that is. That's a character from Game of Thrones. I typed in confession, Game of Thrones, and that picture came up. And the reason I tell you that is because I've never watched Game of Thrones. I tried to watch it. I watched 4 or 5 episodes, 6 episodes maybe of season 1, 3 or 4 times. Never watched it. It's not for want of trying. But I think the reason I say that is because it doesn't matter whether you're completely invested. As long as you surround yourself by really incredible people that do understand the thing that they're selling, surround yourself with experts, not just the people that craft and make stuff, but people who kind of passionately believe or passionately understand Game of Thrones, for instance, in this case. Obsessive craftspeople, we know that, but we also need obsessive creatives. Or this is Josh. Josh has been the creative brains behind all of the campaigns. He's a beautiful, gentle giant and an incredible creative mind. And this is him kind of, I think, many years ago when he was kind of just starting out on season 4, most probably. And he is the biggest Game of Thrones fan I know. None of this work would have happened without Josh's ultimate knowledge of Game of Thrones. And I've found myself very lucky to have this guy in the department because he has led this from the beginning. This is him before, however. You know, it's kind of taken its toll on his skin pigment, and this is him now. He looks very much like that. He's actually in Ireland at the moment shooting something else for Tourism Island. But he is an absolute legend, this guy, and I just wanted to acknowledge the proper brains behind all this. But, you know, it's always worth mentioning, he says, falling off the stage. The production mishaps, and there are a few. You know, this wasn't all sweetness and light, and it wasn't perfect along the way. 3 of them were the carving machine broke halfway through door 2. That's not great. Door 2 fell off the back of a truck traveling from the mill to the second pub, which again, you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And the pub owner incorrectly measured his door frame at one point. So we kind of, you know, it wasn't without its challenges, and there were a load more that I couldn't bring, but there are 3 of them. So I guess the results of that campaign, it was incredibly successful. We were very fortunate for it to be successful. And whereas, you know, the first campaign for season 4, social engagement was so important to it. Season 5, PR was so important. In this instance, the influencer return on investment was huge, and that was the big thing, as well as all the other all the other things that the campaign landed, and notoriety, and kind of the craft skills, and all the publications that it kind of went out in that respect. Social influence has delivered 56 million people were reached, and 1.5 million engagements for $1,000. That's for 1,000 quid, which is a remarkable fact. I'm sure they'll be bringing you up and doing loads more presentations as the back of that. So that was season 6. This is now we're on to season 7. So what we're going to do, we're going to follow it up. You know, we have craft in our DNA now. We kind of want to make sure that we kind of live up to the lovely success that had as a creative idea and as a thing that was embedded in culture. And we stumbled across this idea. I think it came from, we started with the idea, right, okay, Game of Thrones has been going for 6 seasons now. It's about to go for a 7th season, and we've got 1 left. It is a mammoth war. It's war and death and dragons and sex. But essentially, there are battles, and it's all about the sword. And we thought, okay, and knowing our kind of inherent desire and love for craft, having done the doors and the other work, we thought, okay, a symbol of warmongering and craft is the Bayeux Tapestry. So we were like, okay, let's do something like that for Game of Thrones. And that was the idea, really. Then it was just a case of crafting it. Here's the little case study, which we've kind of entered into eurobest, and fingers crossed for that. But I'll play this, and it gives you more of an example, and you don't have to listen to me for the next 2.5 minutes.
Game of Thrones has been filming in Northern Ireland for the last 8 years. But long before being home to the world's biggest TV show, Northern Ireland was once the centre of the textile industry, as the biggest producer of linen thread in the world. To encourage fans of the show to visit the country, we decided to, quite literally, weave Game of Thrones into the fabric of Northern Ireland's heritage and culture. For 4 months, we crafted an intricate 80-metre-long tapestry made from pure Irish linen, depicting the plot lines, characters, battles, deaths, and filming locations of every single episode of Game of Thrones so far. Then, every week throughout Season 7, a new section was designed, hand-woven, stitched and embroidered before being added to the tapestry and revealed mere hours before the next episode was due to air. The digital experience then allowed viewers to delve deeper into the show's details and Northern Ireland itself. Interactive icons highlighted each storyline and plot twist, linking to over 25 Northern Irish filming locations, each of which could be booked as part of a holiday package with just a few clicks. Each week, as the tapestry grew, so did the story.
And look at this tapestry.
Through the art of storytelling and the resurrection of a dying craft, we created the most successful exhibition in the Ulster Museum's 186-year history, and a permanent fixture in Northern Ireland's culture, ultimately driving fans of the show to become fans of the country in which it was filmed.
I love that little dragon roar at the end there. That's what we made. You know, it was taking craft to a completely another level. This was kind of 10 doors, but this was 80 meters of stitching, 219 miles of thread. You saw the facts in there, 15,000 deaths or something ridiculous. And a little army of, was it 25?
35.
35 ladies. Hand woven. We had obviously kind of had it woven, but then stitch and embroidered, and that was remarkable. These people gave up their weekends to kind of do this sort of stuff, you know, which is a remarkable thing. A little note on physical to digital co. So, you know, kind of it was a kind of archaic, kind of ancient art of linen making, kind of making a tapestry. But it was a no-brainer to kind of go, well, how do we make that live digital, and how do we push people to kind of potentially go and kind of book a holiday? So we kind of created the digital version here, which obviously highlighted plot twists and characters, and also then pushed you through to booking holidays, which is ultimately a really important part of the campaign. Little humble brag. It's not actually a humble brag; it's just a brag. During the week of launch, the Game of Thrones Tapestry became the most popular exhibition in the Ulster Museum's history, which is kind of, you know, if you ask yourself the question, you know, kind of have we embedded our ideas into pop culture? The box, yes, we've ticked that. So I'll hand back over to Mark to talk about the results of the campaign and kind of what happened further on.
Well, thank you. Because I suppose we've proven, I hope, that the campaign itself has been a success, at least from a marketing perspective. But was this drawing in the visitors? And it's a question, I suppose, you know, when you're entering awards, like, where's the proof? So we said, fair enough. Let's do a survey. And our sister organisation, Tourism Northern Ireland, commissioned some consultants to go and look at it. And they stood at visitor attractions there last summer and they asked people. And their estimate, and they used the word conservative, they say their conservative estimate is that about 55,000 people, specifically in 2016, came to Northern Ireland only because it was Game of Thrones territory, spending about £18 million. But when they actually stopped people at the tourism attractions, which had that association to do the research, essentially half of the visitors said, well, actually, I didn't come to Northern Ireland because it was Game of Thrones territory, but I'm coming to this attraction because it features in the show. So a huge impact in terms of the visitor numbers it's driving and in terms of the visitor flows and the regional distribution and the money that people are spending. So a great success for Northern Ireland. Great success for Tourism Ireland. Carving out award-winning content, I mean, in summary, why did it work so well? I mean, look, 6 kind of closing thoughts from me. I think our focus on engagement was a key thing. So from the very beginning, going back to that lady on the couch, looking at the television with the iPad, how do we drive engagement? How do we create something that people want to share, basically, and designing things from the off to get people talking has been a core aspect, I think, of the campaign's success. Secondly, a lot of its power has been its topicality. So again, go back to that first season, to be able to have witticisms directly related to the episode you've just seen is fantastic. And to be able to unveil a door based on showing the themes of the episode that just aired the night before, which was how we'd arranged it, because HBO trusted us by season 6 to actually tell us the plot lines, to carve them into the doors. So that was hugely powerful, of course. The publicity angles, in other words, moving it off digital, moving it into the real world, really allowed us to leverage, to get people talking about this campaign, as you saw from CNN to MTV to French TV. You know, this was a real success. This was certainly related, of course, to the quality of the creative itself, which, of course, was hugely powerful in terms of engaging the community as well. Because, again, go back to the 60 million Facebook fans, which are a lot more than that now. There were all these specific Game of Thrones blogs and so on, and Instagrammers, and you know, the focus, as Dave mentioned, the ability to engage this audience through those influencers by having fantastic creative and giving them the sneak preview. giving it to them an hour or two before the rest of the world, was a fantastic thing. For £1,000, it reached 56 million people this with season 6 campaign alone. So engaging with that community, and I mean, David's talked about the collaboration. I mean, the fact that, yeah, there were those 35 ladies, they were all ladies, embroidering the tapestry this year, which was under the direction of the curator of tapestries, the curator of textiles in the Ulster Museum, working with the Ulster Museum, working with the craftspeople who designed all that, put together, working with publicists, working with HBO. It was a huge collaboration because, of course, every scene had to be approved by HBO. So, there was an awful lot of engagement there, a lot of collaboration, but that was its success. That's when Belfast Telegraph was interviewing these women when they were doing the embroidering. They were in news stories and famous in their own locality for the work that they were doing. And last but not least, I suppose, this idea of legacy. So the doors. I mean, we put them there and we thought, that's great, that's season 6 done. Now we move on to season 7, we can take them back down again. There was no way that any of those pubs were ever going to let us take those doors back out. No way. We actually had to put in place a maintenance contract to look after them, because of course they get chipped and damaged and more. Now we actually have to look after the damn things because they become so popular. Because literally pubs have tour groups turning up in their buses to have lunch there because they have a door in the pub. So we feel that we're building a legacy, and I think that has been the part of the elements that have led to the success and why we believe this has been so successful for Tourism Ireland, so successful for Northern Ireland, and so successful for publicists too with some of those awards they've won. But there's only one series left, and there's only one more, so we've got to wait and see what's coming up there. But coming soon, I hope you all are, to Northern Ireland to view the tapestry, which is on display in the Ulster Museum as we speak. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Well done.
That was just brilliant. As a Game of Thrones big fan, that was just fantastic. We have a few minutes if anyone has any questions that they'd like to put to Mark or Dave. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to put forward?
Yeah, we don't know anything about the last season. Don't even ask.
I have one for you that I was just quite interested in. So a lot of our conversations at the festivals, we find as the people who put together the seminars, are around data and creative use of data. And something I find quite interesting about what you've done is that it's all about real world and sort of real activities that people can do and go and touch and feel, etc. To what extent, if at all, did data come into that creative round the table situation? Or was it purely a sort of sense of these are things that are interesting in Ireland, that are relevant to Irish culture, let's just kind of use our gut feeling and go for it? I'd just love to get your thoughts on that.
Do you want to take it? Shall I?
Well, the only way that we used data, actually, in the beginning, was to convince our colleagues that this was a target audience worth pursuing. Because I said at the beginning, people are going, what? Fans of fantasy, those weirdos who sit in, dark corners in rooms, they're not our target audience, So it actually took us, we had to use the data internally to convince our colleagues in Tourism Ireland that actually this is an audience worth investing in, that when you look at their profile and our target audience profile, it's not perfect overlap, but there's enough of an overlap to justify spending initially €200,000, and that was all of paid media. So that was how we used data. The other way that we used data, I suppose, was to show the return on that investment then. Once, as I illustrated from season 4, that 200,000 media investment turned into 1.5 million of earned media. And that made us all sit up in the room and go, okay, actually, we should do something about this.
I guess, you use creative data to kind of see how you reach people best. And we knew that we were already leaning on a massive audience with, kind of 26 million, and like you say, more now. So in terms of the creative idea, and did we use a lot of data to get to the creative idea, I would say not really, no. It was purely based on how we felt this would resonate from a PR point of view, and how we felt. It had to feel really authentic to Game of Thrones fans. If you could do that, and it felt believable, and it felt like an extra bit of, content that the Game of Thrones fans could go, fuck, have you seen this? And tweet about it and kind of talk about it, that community talking about it. That was where our heartland led to push the campaign forward and to help us decide what was going to be next. We knew that Doors were successful. We thought, I'll let you into a secret. Tapestry was an idea that we had while we were sat around the table talking about season 6. So we brought that back the following year. because we loved it and fell in love with it so much. But we pushed it for season 7. So yeah, that would.
Which I think was worth doing because, of course, now the big question is: do we finish it with season 8? I'm hoping publicists will do that out of the fees they've already secured for the work.
Yeah. Well, the plan is to do that. Yeah. The negotiation.
Got one question.
Do I keep my headset on?
Oh, you do.
It's all right. Go on, you say it. We can hear you from
Okay,
there.
with that said, I wonder if there's any, do you have the capability for the finale to do like a Book of Kells type thing? If you've done doors, tapestries, how about a Book of Kells?
What's a Book of Kells?
Oh, you see, he's terrible, isn't he? You
I am
didn't know.
terrible.
Yeah,
What is it?
It's an ancient manuscript,
Right.
done by monks.
Okay. Monks,
exactly.
good.
Yeah, monks.
I approve of them.
Yes, exactly. About 1,000 years ago, come and visit in Trinity College in Dublin next time you're over. One of the most visited attractions in Dublin,
Okay.
where hundreds of thousands of people come every year to see this wonderful illustrated manuscript.
Now I'm interested.
Yeah, there
Could
we go.
well be. We heard it here first. If that's where we end up.
Yeah, he's not on commission.
Full
just
credit.
so you know.
Yeah. Have you planned to do that?
Any final questions? Well, thank you guys. That was a fantastic
having me.
session.
Thank
It was
you.
great.
Thank
Make sure you get a photo of the door, guys. Really great. Thank you so much.
Selfies encouraged.
So that brings us to